What's going on, football fans? It's me, J.R. Clark, back again with another pound for pound ATL. This time riding solo as I'm going to take a look at the defense today. Mainly want to take a look at what I think that this defense is going to look like, what I think the defense is going to run. Um, there's been a handful of speculation, with Raheem Morris being the obviously the head coach and him bringing Jimmy Lake in. So like, what is that going to look like? How is that going to translate down to onto the field? So without much further ado, let's just get into it. Okay. So what we're going to start off with is like a little bit of a history lesson, right? With a lot of coaches, they draw on their experiences, obviously, as we all do throughout our life. So it behooves us to take a look at where did Raheem Morris come from? Where did, Jimmy Lake come from? So let's start with the man in charge. That's Raheem Morris. Um, Obviously his both of them cut their chops as defensive back coaches. I don't think it's anything new. Like we've talked about that quite a bit, but what I want to look at is like how we arrived at what Jimmy Lake stated as what's going to be our defense, which is the 3-4 defense, right? As the base. Now we'll see how much we actually run the base. But it was interesting that they stated that right off the rip, considering Raheem Morris's time in Tampa Bay from being the defensive coordinator, well, the defensive backs coach, like quality assistant, up to defensive back coach, up to the head coach. When he was an assistant, he was under Monty Kiffin. Monty Kiffin runs, that 4-3 Tampa 2 look, right? So in the professional world, Raheem Morris cut his chops in that Tampa 2 look. The cover 2 with the, you know, cover 2, cover 3 really with the middle linebacker dropping deep in the middle of the field covering that third zone where your two, safeties are out creating that cover 3 look. So he goes from there to Washington after his failed stint as a head coach, where he was calling the plays and they were still running that 4-3 look. He goes to Washington under Jim Haslett as the defensive backs coach, um, up there with Mike Shanahan, and they're running that 4-3. That same deal. Then he comes here to Atlanta underneath Dan Quinn. Initially gets hired on as the offensive side of the ball, um, but under Dan Quinn, he's playing under that 4-3 under, which is um, like 4-3 with 3-4 personnel. That's how it was always kind of explained, right? So if you really want to look at it, that was the first time he kind of got a quote unquote taste of a 3-4 defense. Then he goes out to LA. Now, the reason why I bring all this up is because we don't really know what his preference is. What I mean by his, and that's Raheem Morris. Because you could say that in Tampa, when he took over as head coach, he was just continuing what they had, right? Then goes into Washington. He's just a deep defensive backs coach. Comes here to Atlanta. When he does end up being DC the last year of Dan Quinn's uh, head coaching tenure, he's running Dan Quinn's system. When he takes over as head coach, he just keeps that ball rolling. Go out to LA and kind of like what Dan Quinn did to Steve Sarkisian, handing him Kyle Shanahan's playbook and saying, "Here, run this." When he goes out to LA, Sean McVay clearly wants to run a Fangio system. That's why he had brought in Brandon Staley. Brandon Staley gets the job with the Chargers. In comes in Raheem Morris, and Raheem Morris is tasked to just keep it going. This is the system that I want to run. As the head coach, Sean McVay saying, "This is what I want to run." So, keep this going. So now that brings us to um, here in Atlanta, where Raheem Morris is the head coach. Now he gets to call the shots, right? Completely and utterly, he gets to call the shots. And what does he do? He brings in his buddy Jimmy Lake. Now, Jimmy Lake was with him as assistant head coach with the Rams last year. So, they're working on the defense together there. So, one would automatically assume that you're going to just run the same system that they ran out there in LA. And then maybe that's the case, right? Like conventional wisdom says that that's the case. But we'll see how it goes when it comes to what they do here. But now let's take a look at what Jimmy Lake did. Obviously, Jimmy Lake was with Raheem Morris out there in Tampa. So there's 4-3. And then Jimmy Lake went and spent a lot of time in college. And that's where it kind of gets interesting with him because he was out there with Chris Peterson in Washington, where they ran like a 2-4-5 base, which was really like bleeding edge as far as college is concerned. Um, very reliant on the nickel coverages to stop. Now, granted, they were out in the Pac 12 where they're slinging it all over the place. So you have to deal with your like conference first kind of deal. So that was their answer to the Mike Leach air raid and all that jazz. So that probably has a lot to do with what they were running. But what they were running was um, based a lot on like the secondary, right? Washington produced a lot of NFL defensive backs over the past like 10 years, or well, maybe not 10 years, but the past like 7 or 8 years for sure. One of them being, Kevin King actually played underneath Jimmy Lake out there in Washington, which is no surprise that he's here in Atlanta now, probably helping to install and translate what Jimmy Lake is looking for. So let's get into what I think we're going to do, what I think is going to look like. I think that they probably are going to lean on their experience, their latest experience being what they did out there in LA with the Rams. And so, what did they do out there? One of the main things that they did was what is called tight front or tight the front. I guess you could call it. I'm trying to get this picture pulled up, but we'll just do it like this. It'll be all right. So this is, I want it bigger than that. Why is it that little? Aha, that's what I want. So this is what we're looking at here, right? The tight front is you have it's a 3-4 front with the nose tackle, your defensive ends, and your um, outside linebackers and inside linebackers. Um, this is a tight front is a standard like 3-4 formation. The big difference there is that you have the nose tackle is lined up head up on the center, and therefore he has two gaps that he's responsible for, as to where the defensive ends in this particular drawing is showing them looping out, around, but they also have two gaps to deal with. Um, so that's one of the base deals that you see that the Rams run. But the main thing that you see the Rams run is what is called the penny front. Okay. Now, this penny front is like, I don't want to say unique to the Rams, but it's definitely an interesting one. And I don't know if we're going to see it a lot of. As you can see here, it is three down linemen, right? With, head up on the guard. That's that tight front. All right. Then your outside linebackers are up on the line. So this creates the 5-1 and only being one linebacker. So with the linebacker room that we have, I don't actually know if we're going to deploy it like this. I actually wouldn't be surprised if you saw more of a 3-3-5 look, um, given the personnel that we have. But what really makes this go, the engine that makes this all go, is obviously number 99, Aaron Donald. Aaron, like, he's a generational player. He can play all up and down this line. And in doing the research, trying to figure out what we were going to do and what we were going to run, it became pretty evident that because of a player such as Aaron Donald, they were able to formulate a front that was able to manipulate the offense, right? So more times than not, they knew the offensive line was going to shade and shift towards Aaron Donald. So knowing that you're going to slide the entire line towards Donald, it allowed you to create matchups on the other side of the ball. Like wherever you wanted to try to get your matchup at, all you had to do was put Donald on the opposite side of that matchup. So that's the gas that made that engine go, or the engine of that defense, right? Especially of that defensive line. Now here in Atlanta, we don't have anybody like an Aaron Donald. Okay, so they're going to have to try to get that same kind of disruption, I think, out of multiple players. And so I think what you're going to see is the combination of Grady Jarrett and David Onyemata. We unfortunately didn't get to see that a ton last year. When we did get to see it, it was a nice, it was working well, in the pressure forms that they were able to generate. But once Grady went down, then it put a lot of emphasis on David Onyemata to keep that going, and they weren't able to do the rotation uh, like they, I think, would hope that they wanted to. So the the onus is going to be not just on trying to duplicate what you got from Aaron Donald, because that's just not going to happen. Um, that'd be foolish to think that you're going to be able to pull that off. But another like major part of that was Greg Gaines, who, if I'm not mistaken, is right here in 91. Now, Greg Gaines, who oddly enough played for Jimmy Lake up there in Washington, um, is a key cog to what makes it all really go. Is the fact that he can hold his blocks like he does, clog up the run lanes, and um, command the attention that he does, which allows the outside linebackers to run, which allows the one lone linebacker to not get blocked up on. These are important things now, which leads me to the running joke right now is Eddie Goldman, right? If Eddie Goldman can get back to form, there's your answer to Greg Gaines. But if you can't, like, is Zion Loge up to that role? Is he up to that space eater? Now, Raheem Morris obviously doesn't have a problem playing young guys a significant amount. Kobe Turner and Bryant Young last year on that Rams defensive line. So it'll be interesting to see if Zion Loge really gets in there, if he can push for reps, because he definitely has the size and comes from a defensive line at Georgia that is used to being dominant, used to being the engine that drives everything. They did it with a four-man rush, which I don't think that they're going to try to do here in Atlanta. I think we're going to see a lot more of this like five-man look, as to where you something I brought up on the show on Tuesday. Um, Almost a one, not a one for one, but like, I mean, as far as like size, speed, and all the measurables, like, it wouldn't surprise me if they put like Troy Anderson in that Leonard Floyd role. The outside linebacker who can drop into coverage and also can rush the passer. Saying, I think you'll see a good mix between him and uh, Carter. I'm blanking on Zoe Carter's first, Lorenzo. Lorenzo Carter. I think that those two could play that type of role, the role of the athletic outside linebackers that can change the lookup. You have five on the line, forcing the O line to account for all five, and then at the last second or right at the snap, you drop one of them out, and you don't lose any passing strength that way. Um, so that's what I'm gonna look at right now as far as like the defensive line goes. Next week I'm gonna do some, talking about the coverages, but definitely expect more of the like 5-1 penny front um to make its appearance here. Because I just, the success that Raheem had out there in LA, I don't think you like go away from it that easily, right? And also the the tight front is kind of the meeting point for Jimmy Lake and Raheem as far as things that they are both very, familiar with. So the combination of those things should play well here with the players that we have, as far as Zach Harrison, who is apparently bulked up and is playing up and down the line. Like, this is the right staff to get use out of bigger, longer DNs and things of that nature. So I'm excited to see what rolls out here in Atlanta, but I expect it to look a fair amount like what you saw in LA these past few years, that Fangio system making its way here to Atlanta. Appreciate y'all listening, hanging out with me, listening to this. And as always, y'all can find me on Twitter. I'm at Grim1128. You can check out Jonathan at Jonathan N. Holder. Come by and say hi. And we'll be back live on Tuesday to discuss more Falcons things. As always, Falcons fans, rise up.